next testifier is Minnesota Teacher of the Year of 2019, Jess Davis.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Vice Chair, Ranking Member, members of the committee. I am Jessica Davis. I'm grateful to have another opportunity to confront the vast inequities in Minnesota's public education and testify on behalf of the Increased Teachers of Color Act. In review, I began teaching high school mathematics in 2006, and it was during my time at South St. Paul's Secondary that I was honored as Minnesota's Teacher of the Year for 2019-2020. Some know that I am a Minnesota native, the daughter of educators, a graduate of public school, hold a bachelor and master's degree from two of Minnesota's finest institutions. And yet, as a biracial Black and white female in the field of STEM, I have never had a teacher who looks like me. I've thought a lot about that over the last year. I believe that the student and teacher experiences are connected, and that we as teachers are not only responsible for educating future adults, but nurturing a love for learning that inspires the next generation of educators. Given our current realities, I wonder, have we done this? What are we willing to change in order to recenter the margins and bring life to the lip service? How do we hold one another accountable so that the heavy lifting of this work is not laid solely at the feet of teachers of color, but where excellence is demanded of everyone and mediocrity is acceptable for no one? What comes up for you when I voice those wonders? During my own struggle through distance learning last spring, I began to question how I personally have contributed to a system centered in whiteness or exacerbated inequities and even prioritized completion over critical consciousness and cultural competency. By the time my South Minneapolis neighborhood was in flames last summer, I confess the majority of my time was no longer focused on mathematics or essential standards, but spent with my students processing what they were living. I listened to my students' fears and frustrations and attempted to offer kinship through my own experience as a student near their own ages during the Rodney King trial of the 90s. And it was then that one of my dear kids looked straight into my soul through a camera and wondered, if you've been through this before, then why didn't you do something? It was in that moment that I realized I was unwilling to normalize for my students the tokenization that I was experiencing as the only Black teacher in a district for almost a decade. My exhaustion was not their burden to carry. So I resigned. And now there's one less teacher of color in the classroom. That burden is on all of us, namely the adults who have lived through it and know better. It is on us to disrupt the systems of status quo, to invest in practices that not only recruit, but retain staff that represent the diverse student population. But most of all, it's on us to demand that all teachers are qualified to meet the unique needs of student populations, including white staff. Intersections of oppression may not yet be quantifiable, but the impact is exponential. I was physically reminded of the way my brown body keeps score when just a week after my decision to leave the classroom, I was diagnosed with cancer. And once again, I considered what my students were witnessing and what they would infer and carry with them about what it means to be Black, brown, or Indigenous in America. We must agree that the work of creating anti-racist, equitable learning experiences for all kids is not about checking a box, nor is it an optional practice that one can opt out. It will take all of us individually unpacking our own truths and how we got here, and collectively grappling with the discomfort that comes with our students asking us, why haven't we done something about it? I now serve as a racial equity instructional coach in St. Louis Park schools, where I get to support other teachers at building their own capacity to grow as critically conscious and culturally relevant educators. I'm learning that implementing strategies which validate, affirm, embrace, and integrate culture and community strengths cannot be done alone or in isolation, nor can it be left to the bodies of color. I have witnessed the power of protocol and common language that names the practices that institutionalize racism in our school. But most importantly, I have heard our students confirm that they want teachers who want to do this work. The student leaders that I've gotten to work with this year have reminded me that they and history are always watching, and we adults are always teaching, regardless of classroom or title. Our kids are consuming the actions taking place around them and at our buildings of government and listening to the words of our leaders and our elected officials. So it is on us to remain mindful that how we model our priorities now determines whether these students will grow up to scale the walls of the Capitol building or give truth to power through poetry inside of it at a historical inaugurations. We've done the research, we have the data. I believe we've exhausted the conversation. So I wonder, what will it take for this to be our last generation of kids who asks of the adults, why didn't you do something about it? Indeed. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Davis.